This is another damn podcast about digital asset management. I'm Henrik Gyor. Today I'm speaking with Christy King. Christy, how are you?
Very good.
Christy, how are you involved with digital asset management?
I am the newly appointed Vice President of Technology Research and Development for Zuffa, which is the parent company of the Ultimate Fighting Championship and several other MMA brands, mixed martial arts brands. And we started down the digital asset management path by trying to organize a method to distribute video to non-traditional resources. We have a very, very young audience, tends to be males, 18 to 34, very much closer to the 18 range. And these guys all have every gadget, new fancy cool thing that hits the market sooner than almost anybody else. So we really tried hard very early on to be able to distribute to all of those devices. And many of those outlets did not have traditional ways to take in video content, meaning tape. So in order for us to create a file-based workflow that made any sense and deliver the accompanying metadata, which means images and text descriptions at price points and policy rules about where things could be shown and what country, we had to come up with a distribution methodology and a way to create all those materials and distribute them and keep track of them all over the world in all of these technologies.
And Christy, how does an organization involved with mixed martial arts use digital asset management?
Well, what we do, since we started out trying to distribute in all these places in all these different ways, what you discover very, very quickly when you start with a relatively contained single goal, which is we wanted to deliver video, what you find very, very quickly, no matter where you start in an organization with asset management, is that it sort of snowballs into a really big effort, and all of a sudden you learn a whole bunch about all these different technologies and all these different vendors that can solve all sorts of problems. And you know, gosh, people in the company get a load of the first problem you solve and their eyes lit up and they get super creative and excited and go, gosh, you know, if we can do that, then we can do this and we can do this other thing and we can do this other thing. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon you have yourself a huge variety of problems you could solve. Mm-hmm. And every time you solve one problem, then there's three more, because no piece of information in a company lives in isolation. Sure. And one of the things you find is you'll discover that if you start to distribute something and you're going to change somebody's workflow, let's say in marketing, you know, now instead of emailing a picture to the advertising agency, you're now going to upload it somewhere, right? Seems simple enough. You change that, you're done. What'll happen is within a couple days, you'll have 4 other people that come out of the woodwork that say, hey, I copy and paste that out of the website, or I download that image and send it over here in order to do the poster or the podcast or the, you know, whatever it is. And all of these people had just figured out a way to adapt and survive with the information wherever it lived somewhere in the company. So what you discover is when you start down the digital asset management path is workflow becomes a really, really, really interesting challenge to solve and get communication and effort out of everybody, so that you don't create 5 more problems by solving the first problem. So mixed martial arts is no different than any other company in that you've got to figure out a way to make sure everybody has the resources they need to get their job done.
And what advice would you like to share with DAM professionals and people aspiring to become DAM professionals?
We work with several vendors. There isn't any one particular vendor that solves all of our problems. And I think one of the interesting changes that I've seen in the way that I use technology is that it used to be that if you needed to have somebody edit video, you bought an edit system. And if you needed to deliver something, you know, you used a shipping company. And all of these kinds of solutions were separate and disparate and had nothing to do with each other. Mm-hmm. When you get into digital asset management, everybody's stuff lays on top of everybody else's stuff. And I would like to see an awful lot more vendors do what my vendors have been really willing to do, which is work with each other. So we have a company called Levels Beyond that really kind of deals with our video solution, with their reach engine, but we've asked them to work very, very closely with the folks at Denim Group who have designed and built our CMS backend for our website. And I've asked them to tie in very tightly with the company that produces much of our fight statistics. And all of these folks need to work together and need to understand each of their technologies, not necessarily even at a surface level, but at a pretty deep level, so that they can understand how to use the best of what each company has to offer. So really it's that interest and ability in people to think in a more open source and shared kind of way, not necessarily to give their things, their trade secrets away, but just sort of live in the world of understanding that whatever they're doing is going to be needed to be shared by several other people besides the company that they're selling their product to. So that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give. Be a little bit more willing to be open and work directly with other vendors. I started my process really very much in the production department, and it has blossomed to being an asset management solution that we're applying with lots of people across our entire organization. So really I've sort of have one big digital asset management system, but I'm calling each department's little asset management system a little bit different name as we implement this stuff, so as not to scare people to death.
Good idea.
You're asking people to do a huge amount of change and workflow and culture shift in order to think about create everything they do. Now they have to kind of at least put a little bit of their mind towards the fact that whatever they're doing, they're communicating that to everyone else in the organization and other people outside of the organization at the moment that they create it in a shareable form. So communication becomes this even more important than it might have been to an organization before. You just don't upload an image. You need to upload an image and call it something that makes sense in the bigger organizational sense, that's related to terms, search terms, and dates, and maybe days that the things that should be an invoice should be issued so that someone gets paid when this thing gets uploaded. I mean, so you're talking about marketing, accounting, finance, financial analysis, an invoicing process, and something that's ultimately maybe rights are communicated that's related to your legal department. So this is a pretty demanding, big kind of concept to introduce to a company. And I think vendors and people thinking about doing digital asset management in general really need to make sure they take it slow and explain to people a lot all along the way the purpose of doing each of these extra tasks in order to make the overall company run more efficiently. Especially if you're a worldwide company or you have, organizations spread across several states or across the world. This really getting taxonomy right and communication paths tight in a digital asset management system can make a huge difference in a company that's spread out like that geographically.
Well, thanks, Christy. For more on digital asset management, log on to anotherdamblog.com. Another Damn Podcast is available on Audioboo, iTunes, and the Tech Podcast Network. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to send me an email at anotherdamblog@gmail.com. Thanks again.